Hi there! In this lesson, we're going to talk about systems of equations and story problems. So what are we doing? We're going to use a system of equations, of linear equations, to solve a story problem. So when we're solving a system of linear equations, I just wanted to review this. There are three methods on how you can solve a system of equations. We can use elimination, which is really my preferred method, but it most really just depends on the problem that I'm given and the information that I have. But if at all possible, I like to use elimination the best. Substitution is the other method that we use algebraically. And then there's graphing, which we can just use, in this day and age, just use the graphing calculator. And I'll show you a good one to use while we're in this video. When you're solving, you want to choose the method that you find to be the easiest, because you can pick whichever one you like. Because there's three different choices, unless you're doing a problem and your teacher says, specifically says, you must use elimination to solve this problem. Use whatever method you choose. And you just want to follow all the directions. So use the one that you like the best, that you feel the most comfortable with. So I have three problems for you to do. I'm going to try and touch on at least two of these methods, and if you have any questions about the third one that didn't get used, just let me know, and I can send you a separate video on how to do elimination, because I'm not going to use that in these three examples. Okay, so here's my first example. It says a textbook store sold a combined total of 431 physics and biology books in a week. The number of biology textbooks sold was 81 less than the number of physics textbooks sold. How many textbooks were sold of each type? All right, so I like to highlight all the information. So I have a combined total of physics and biology books. Now, so let's write some information down. We have to choose some variables. So when I'm doing these, typically, people use X and Y. When I'm in these kinds of situations, I like to use variables that correspond with the words I'm using, because that to me makes more sense. So I have physics books and I have biology books. So I'm going to let P represent physics books. And I'm going to let B represent biology books. I'm just going to write bio books. Okay. It told us that we have a combined total of 431 physics and biology books, which means I have that physics plus biology is equal to 431. That's how many were sold. Okay, so let's keep reading. It says the number of biology textbooks sold was 81 less than the number of physics textbooks sold. So this is where you want to kind of do your decoding. So this part right here, number of biology textbooks sold. That just is going to be represented by B, the number of biology books. Okay, was. Was or is means equals. 81 less than, I'm running out of colors, the number of physics textbooks. Okay, so think about it this way. Let's think about a different problem. If I have 6 less than 10, what number is that? It's 4. How did you get that? So if I said 6 less than 10, I'm just going to write this. 6 less than 10. Okay, we know the answer to that is 4. So when I look at that, how did I figure that out? I took this piece and I subtracted this piece. I really did, I have to match up my colors here. I really did 10 minus 6. So when if I go back to here where it says 81 less than the number of physics textbooks sold, I'm going to say I have to do my physics textbooks sold first, minus 81. So those are going to be my equations. Now, I look at this. Here's my two equations for my system of linear equations. And I ask myself, what's the best method to solve these? Well, I'm going to choose substitution. Why? Because this second equation here is already solved for a variable. So I know that b is equal to p minus 81. And here I have a b. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my skeleton and I'm going to say, okay, let me just make this a little bit smaller. Get this out of the way. So I'm going to say that p plus my b value equals 431. My b value goes right here, but what's b equal? B equals this. So I'm actually plugging in here p minus 81. Now I'm going to solve my equation. I'm going to put a line down the middle because whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. Now, once I put this in, I can drop my parentheses because my parentheses were just there to remind me that was my skeleton for what b was. So I'm going to add together my like terms. I have two p's, so this becomes 2p minus 81 equals 431. I have to get p on a side by itself. First thing I have to do, add 81 to both sides. I do that. Feel free to use a calculator. 2p is equal to 512. Now I have to get p on a side by itself. I have to cancel out this 2. So to get rid of this 2, I'm going to divide, because remember this says 2 times p. To undo times, to undo multiplication, you have to divide. I'm going to divide both sides by 2, so I end up with p is equal to 256. Okay, what does that mean? That means I sold, or the store sold, 256 physics textbooks. How many biology books do they sell? Well, we have to take this number, 256, and plug it in somewhere where there's a p. You can choose which equation you want to use. Do you want to use this top one, or do you want to use this bottom one? Well, to me, I'm going to use this bottom one here because I only have to plug in the 256. I don't have to solve for b, I just have to do the math. So I'm going to say that my biology books equals 256 minus 81. And remember, I took this answer here and I plugged it in for my p. So 256 minus 81, use a calculator, do the math. What do you get? 175. So, whoops, not negative. So I sold 175 biology books and 256 physics books. Next example. Okay, the sum of two numbers is 56. So I'm taking two numbers and I'm going to add them together. So I have my first number and I have my second number. Okay, I'm going to call my first number, this time I am going to use x and y. I'm going to call my first number x and I'm going to call my second number y. So I take my two numbers, I add them together, because sum means add, I get 56. Okay, now I'm going to decode this next sentence. One number is 3 times as large as the other number. Okay, so it doesn't matter which one you want to choose. So let's just say one number is the first number. So I'm going to say that my first number, x, is 3 times as large as. So 3 times the other number, y. So just so you can see how I decoded it, this is what it equals. That's how I decoded the sentence up above, all right? So now, here are my two equations for my linear system, for my system of equations. So I have to solve. Now, you can, it's not picky. It wants to know, how can you get x and y? So you can solve this by graphing. So because I happen to use x's and y's here, I'm going to solve this by graphing. If you go to www.desmos.com, okay, they have a really good graphing calculator. They also have an app. So I'm going to open it up. Looks like this. All right, so the Desmos, this is a really cool graphing calculator because I'm going to just scooch this way over here. I just need to be able to see my equations. Because I don't have to solve for y like I do if I'm using like a TI calculator. I can literally type in my equations the way that they are. So on this first line, I'm literally going to type in x plus y equals 56. Now, you might say, well, why can't I see it? Well, do you see that your graph only like in your y value, I can't use a pointer on this side, but see how it only goes to 56? So I'm just going to drag it out. I'm using my fingers because I'm on the tablet here. And now I can see my graph. That's called changing your window. You're changing what you can see. So I'm going to come over here on this side. I'm going to graph my other one. I can say x equals 3 times y. Okay, so do you see where these lines cross? Right here at this point, you can click on it, and it tells you 42, 14. That's the answer. Okay, when you have a system of equations and you're finding the solution, what it really means is you have two lines and they're going to cross. Where do they cross at? So you just solved it like this. So if I come here, the answer is 42, 14. So I'm going to close out my graph here. And I got an ordered pair of 42, 14. That's it. Those are my first. So my first number, that means, because remember, this is your x and this is your y. So your first number is x. That means that x is equal to 42 and y is equal to 14. And sometimes they're picky when they ask you to type these in. Like one wants to know like what's the smaller number and what's the bigger number. So just make sure that you type it in the right spot. But that's literally what it means when you have a system of equations. Here's two lines. Where do they cross? So graphing is another nice way to do these kinds of problems. Okay, last example. At a basketball game, a vendor sold a combined total of 168 hamburgers and hot dogs. The number of hamburgers sold was 2 times the number of hot dogs sold. Find the number of hamburgers and hot dogs sold. Okay, so here we go with our decoding. So first thing I notice, I have a combined total of 168 hamburgers and hot dogs. All right, now like I said, I like to use usually like the letters that go along with this, but hamburgers and hot dogs, I'm just gonna, we're gonna call it B for burgers instead of hamburgers. So this is the number of burgers sold, and we're gonna call it H for hot dogs. Now, you always want to write this out so that you remember what you assigned your variables to, because sometimes later on you can forget what you assign them to, especially if you choose X and Y and you don't remember how you assign them because your variables don't correspond with the things that you're solving for. Okay, so we know that burgers plus hot dogs equals 168. So let's decode the next part. So it says the number of hamburgers sold was 2 times the number of hot dogs sold. So I'm totally going to decode this. It says the number of hamburgers sold, which we said was burgers, was means equals 2 times the number of hot dogs sold. So B equals 2H. Okay, so in this case, again, I would use substitution because here are my two equations. And this second equation down here is already solved for a variable. So wherever I have a B up here, I can plug stuff in. So I'm going to, in my second equation, I'm going to use my skeleton. So I'm going to say my B value plus H is equal to 168. Now my B comes from the second value. So down here, the B is equal to 2H. So this 2H is the part that goes here. So this becomes, because my burgers is the same, because remember, B is equal to 2H. Okay. Once I plug that in, I can drop my parentheses as long as there's nothing outside of it where I have to do any multiplying, and I can solve. So I'm going to combine together my like terms. 2H plus H gives me 3H. To get H on the side by itself, I have to get rid of that 3, so I'm going to divide both sides by 3. These cancel each other out. You can use a calculator. 168 divided by 3 gives you 56. So that means we sold H is 56 hot dogs. So I'm going to write this up here. Okay, now I also have to figure out how many hamburgers. Now you can go back to your original equations, these two guys up here. and figure out which equation do you want to plug in that 56. I'm going to pick my bottom one again because it's already solved for my variable, so it's easier for me to do that. So I'm going to say that if b is equal to 2h, and I know that h is equal to 56, then the number of burgers is 2 times 56, which is 112. So I sold, well, not I sold, the vendor sold 112 hamburgers and 56 hot dogs. So hopefully that helps you understand how to use a system of equations to solve story problems. Remember, all it means is we're figuring out where our lines are crossing. And the other thing that you have to remember when you're doing story problems like this, if they're giving you 2 variables, burgers and hot dogs, burgers sold, hot dogs sold, you have to have the same number of equations as they give you variables. So because I have 2 variables, that means I have to have 2 equations, which means I have a system of equations to solve. Let me know if you have any questions. If you need to see an example of elimination, I'm happy to send you a video along. Good luck!